enjoying the DevOps days so far? Yeah, that was what I supposed. When I came from in Poland, we have winter in February. I didn't expect that Geneva has this, special exception to have summer in February. It was pretty amazing for me. I have all my winter clothes with me, so it's a tough challenge. But anyway. I'm going to be talking today about egoless programming, or the philosophy of writing better code. When I first proposed this topic, I thought that this idea is just too crazy and nobody would like to listen to it. It turns out it's not that bad. It's still crazy, but at least there are many more crazy people than me, so thank you very much for coming here. My name is Piotr Gaczkowski. It's a very hard name to pronounce, so you can just call me Piotr if you want. I've been in the IT industry for like 12 years, I guess, doing lots of different stuff. And recently, I'm mostly interested in empowering other people to realize their potential by providing courses, for example, writing a book, articles, things like that. So I also do DevOps consultancy, but I'm trying to share some things I've learned along my journey with others. So this will also be a case of things I've learned around my journey. For some of you, this may be like really basic stuff. For some of you, this may be something new. I hope everyone would get something out of it. So, speaking about ego, we have to start with some definition of what ego is. If we want ego-less development, ego-less programming, what is this ego I am talking about? So, do you have any ideas of what this will be about? Yeah? You? No, it's not you, it's me. But yeah, you're close. You're pretty close. So we can define ego as the self, this special person that lives in our head, that makes us realize that the world is divided between what I want, what I need, what I see, and everything else. So ego is the driving force that makes us us. Without it, we would basically wouldn't have any incentive to do anything. It also puts our own interests over everyone else's. Not necessarily everyone else's all the time, we'll get to that, but generally it means that our needs are a bit more important than others' needs. And ego can also be understood as our own inner critic. So it's not necessarily good or bad. It has this different qualities. We have, for example, egoism or egotism that are generally considered to be bad things, but then we have this ego that drives basically our civilization forward by making us do things that make our lives easier. So it's both a motor of progress and at times a tool for destruction. So we can use it, we have to use it wisely like any other tool. So the dangers of ego. What are the dangers of ego in terms of software development, product development? Basically, how does it relate to the DevOps Days agenda? First of all, when we have ego issues in our development teams or anywhere in an organization, we can end up with terrible APIs, things that are unusable because they weren't designed with other people in mind. They were designed just to praise the glory of the one who invented them. Then we have the not invented here syndrome. Who've heard about the not invented here syndrome before? Okay. Not invented here syndrome is, for example, we are looking for a solution to a particular problem. There exists a solution to this problem on the market already. All we have to do is just to either buy it or follow the instructions on how to implement it ourselves. There is something that basically screams, okay, I am here to help you, just take me with you, I'll do what you want. But we think, nah, these people who invented it aren't us. They aren't any good. We will do it ourselves, and we will do it much better. You can imagine how this usually turns up. For example, if two people decided on the spur of a moment that they want to implement their own version of Kubernetes and that it would be much, much better than the stuff that the Google is pushing and the CNCF is pushing to everyone else. Maybe, just maybe it would be actually better for them. But I guess that the tried solution have much, much better chances of survival than something invented just because you don't want to use what is already available on the market. Another thing, ego clashes. And ego clashes is a highly cultural thing. We have a team or different teams, and in the team we have several people that just want to assert their own version of reality and make sure everybody else is following the same vision. Whereas this might not be the best vision for the company or for the product or for anybody involved. It's just somebody wanting to make a statement that this one person is probably the most important person in a team because this person has an opinion. Now, entrenched code ownership. Why is entrenched code ownership here? So code ownership is basically something good. We want the team that have written the code to take ownership, to feel the need to actually care about it when it comes to production, when it comes to operations, when it comes to maintenance. It's our code. We want to own our code and everything that goes with it. But entrenched code ownership is a pathological situation when not necessarily the team owns the code, but one particular person says that, oh, no, this is my code, I wrote it, I know how it is supposed to look, I don't want any of your comments, I don't need any of your contributions, it's the best thing that we can do, so just leave it like it is. You can imagine the problems stemming from this. Usually it isn't the best thing on the earth. That's the first point. And second point, after a few such battles in the trenches between different persons on the team, people just feel that the situation becomes a bit rotten, and they don't want to have anything to do with the code. The morale drops and the products are worse and worse. So, a brief guide to philosophy before we come back to the topic of technology. I'll be skipping back and forth between them because I feel like they really belong to each other. So, when we think of philosophers, most of the time we imagine those ancient guys, usually with long beards, roaming through Greece or Roman Empire, that are basically doing nothing or just if they're doing something, they're reading books or writing books or discussing the books, none of which have any impact on the society whatsoever. And that's not an accurate picture of philosophy, because besides the metaphysical aspects that philosophers are often associated with, philosophers often discuss such topics as logic, as, for example, moral obligations. What are the moral obligations of being a human? The society issues, the cultural issues. So if you ever discussed any of these, for example, if you've ever used logic, then you may consider yourself to be a philosopher. So, how did some of the philosophies that I wanted to show here perceived ego? First of all is the Stoicism, which is an ancient one, originated in Greece, I think, also popular in the Roman Empire. After that, it fell into oblivion for quite some time, and it gained some recent resurrection due to a few hype people saying that it's the answer to all of us problems, because recently anything ancient is now considered to be hip enough to use everywhere. I think that Stoicism is actually a pretty cool philosophy. Why? Because the question, one of the things that Stoicism tells us to ask ourselves is, what is under my control? If I can control something, if I have some autonomy over some outcome, I can do my best to achieve this outcome. Then, if something is out of my control, there is no use worrying about it, because we can't do anything about it. We can't change it. Complaining won't do the thing. And worrying, yeah, it's really counterproductive, because it's better to focus our energy on something else, something that we can actually do. For example, a popular approach would be, if we want to go out, okay, so how's the weather like? Oh, there are some clouds, so maybe it will be raining. Oh, it would be if it would be raining, then it would be a very, very sad day. I don't like rains. I don't think I should go out anyway. It's a bad idea. These clouds can ruin everything. That's not a Stoic approach. The Stoic approach would be to look outside the window, if there weren't these curtains in here, and see, okay, there are clouds. It looks like it's going to be raining. What can I do about it? I can take an umbrella, right? So we take an umbrella and go for a stroll. If the rain happens, we have an umbrella. If nothing happens, we also win, because there is a beautiful sunny weather outside. Believe it or not, when I was looking for a picture to depict Stoics, all I have found that was at least a bit related was this cat in here. And actually, I think it's a pretty good depiction, because cats are quite stoic creatures. They are either hungry, in which case they just do something about it, or they feel the need to play, be mischievous, be, cats, in case they also do something about it. Usually it consists of, I don't know, tearing down the curtains or destroying everything else that is in their area. Or if none of these two states applies, they just sleep. They don't worry about, oh, I wonder whether the curtains would be still tomorrow so I can shred them to pieces. No, they don't do that. They are fine the way it is. There's always something that, they can destroy, so it's totally cool. Yeah. So focusing on what we can control sounds totally easy, but it's probably also the hardest part of this philosophy, because we're just programmed to worry about the future, and changing it is really hard, but it's also probably worth it. And Stoicism also teaches us that it's not necessarily important what other people think about us, or what we can do to make ourselves better. Stoicism just focuses on the things that we can control, right? So what can I do to have the best impact in life, and not to make others think I am the best person? So it teaches us that ego is a bit fragile. We can listen to it. We can listen to the criticism of our ego, but we shouldn't necessarily, make anything about it. If someone says us that we are a bad person, okay, it's this person's judgment. This person is allowed to judge us this way, but we know that we've done everything that's to our best capability, so we're fine with that. Another thing after the Stoicism fell out of favor was the rise of Christianity, and with that there were two Latin phrases. One is Soli Deo Gloria, which translates roughly to glory to God alone, and the second one is Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam, which translates to for the greater glory of God. These are related. The first one was used, for example, by some artists like Johann Sebastian Bach or Handel to describe their works. So basically, they didn't write their name under their works. They considered their works to just be manifestation of some bigger thing for the God's inspiration in their case. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam is something used by the Jesuits, and the meanings are roughly the same, that we don't do the things because we are the wisest in town. We do the things because we are parts of some bigger community, bigger thing. It can be seen, for example, in the building of huge cathedrals in Middle Ages. So the one approach to building a cathedral, if you approach one person building a cathedral and ask, okay, how are you feeling? This person may answer, the work is shit. I have to just take all those bricks and lay them together, and I work like 16-hour days. I have no time for my family, but I have to feed them, so that's just work. And you can approach a different person working on the same site, on the same cathedral, and asking them, okay, so what is it that you do? I'm building a cathedral. This would be the most splendid cathedral ever seen in the world. It would be biggest, most, illuminous. It would be just the best thing. The work is hard, it's true. I don't see my family most of the time, and yeah, it's really tiring, and the cathedral probably won't be finished before I die. But I tell you, it's greatest job in the world, because I can be the part of this thing. So if we see that we are the part of the team, we are part of something bigger, that we are not just doing our own individual contribution, the perspective slightly changes. Going a little bit to the east, there are the Buddhism and the Zen philosophies, which also have they basically have the idea of losing one's ego. So they think that ego for most of the time is unimportant. It's the greater universe, greater powers that are actually the things that matter. These are the things that we should worry about, to be the part of the greater universe and to just stop thinking of ourselves. There's one joke I'm not sure if you're familiar with and can imagine what it is from this picture. Anybody recognizes it? Nobody recognizes it. Good. So this person in here is, let's suppose, a Zen monk. And a Zen monk comes to a hot dog stand, and the hot dog stand person asks, how can I help you? And the Zen monk replies, make me one with everything. That's the way how it works. So, going back to DevOps, DevOps is a very modern philosophy. It originated like in the last 2 decades. And the philosophy, for me at least, can be condensed in some of these statements in here. So we want to close the gap between the client and the development, whether it's software development, hardware development, generally product development. We want to have short release cycles so we can test different hypotheses very fast and check what works, what not. So we just embrace failure instead of trying to make things that just can't fail. Also, DevOps features iterative approach to design. We don't want to build something that is perfect and that would satisfy all the ego problems of the architect. We want to check what is viable and then build on it. Build another iteration, build something better. We won't get the masterpiece done in the first time we approach it. And the final thing with DevOps philosophy is that we want to reduce waste. We don't want to spend too much time on doing things that don't bring value. So, oh, the picture is missing. Well, it wasn't important anyway. How does DevOps fit with all the other philosophies that I've spoken about before? So DevOps requires communication if we want development to deliver the products to clients quicker. We need to establish some means of communication between the client, the development, and all the other parties that are present here. When I'm saying development here, I don't mean just software development. Let's just say that I mean product development, which contains many different interested parties that are responsible for delivering the outcomes. And also, DevOps, just like, for example, building cathedrals, requires sharing goals. We have to be empathetic with our client. We have to understand what are the reasons why are we building this particular product, because without it, we would probably be wasting some resources, most probably time, and it would be, unfortunately, our time. So instead of doing things that are fun and bring value, we would be doing something that would be thrown to trash. And to get this, the communication, the shared goals, the empathy, we need to listen to the other party. We need to listen to our client. We need to listen to our teammates. We need to listen to people from other teams that we are interacting with. And this requires putting the ego aside. Because when we are thinking in terms of our ego, we are no longer listening to other people's problems. We are no longer willing to share their point of view, to learn their point of view. We are just thinking of how to get as much as possible from this situation for ourselves. So, how ego disrupts DevOps? You can imagine what's the cost of terrible APIs. You have an API that's written by someone who thinks it's the best thing in the world, whereas all the users think that it's unusable. What are possible outcomes from that? Any ideas? Exactly. Nobody would be using it. And if nobody would be using it and they still require the functionality that it provides, they would probably need to reinvent it. So this would be an obvious source of waste, because now we would either have two different APIs that do the same thing, or we would have people trying to use the API but wasting time to actually learn how it works. Not invented here is also a pretty obvious source of waste. If, going back to the Kubernetes example, if we decide not to adopt Kubernetes but to write our own implementation of orchestration layer, or however we want to use Kubernetes, we want to do it ourselves, we want to do it just for our own purposes as an internal project, this wouldn't be done in a single afternoon. This would require a lot of effort, and there are high chances this effort will go to waste. Ego clashes are a bit more subtle. We may not necessarily see the waste in here, but the waste would not necessarily be technical. The waste may be cultural. If our team starts to rot, if the morale drops, if the situation becomes toxic, people will feel the burnout. They will want to leave the team, and if they are unable to leave the team, they would just not do the best work they are able to do. So this is also a waste. Same thing applies to entrenched code ownership. If people can't contribute to the common code, because, as I've mentioned earlier, the code for me is not owned by a single person. The code is owned by a team responsible for delivering the product. So if we have this entrenched code ownership, people won't contribute because they know they will be dismissed anyway. The thing would just start to gather more and more depth, and this way, once somebody realizes that it no longer serves its purpose, it had to be basically rewritten from scratch, which would be more costly than simply making iterative improvements while it is still in use. Also, entrenched code ownership can lead to another thing that is very risky and a potential source of waste. Do you know what I'm talking about? Buzz factor, exactly. The buzz factor, I'm not sure if it was proposed by Guido van Rossum of Python, but I know it's definitely something that often goes with the name. The buzz factor is the number of people that had to be hit by a buzz in order for your project to stop being developed. I complicated it. So basically, how many people have you take out from your team in order for the product to be unknown to anyone? If there's one person that knows everything about a given piece of code, then this person is responsible for all the knowledge, and if this person gets sick, gets hit by a bus, gets transferred to another place, changes company, then the product dies because nobody knows how to use it, how to develop it, how to maintain it. So we know the risks, we know the different approaches from different philosophies. Now, how can we make it so the ego issues won't be as pronounced in our own team or teams, and to protect ourselves against the ego issues? So there are both cultural tools and technical ones. The cultural tools, first of all, are the 3 pillars of great culture, as introduced, I think, in the Culture Code book. It's safety, vulnerability, and shared future. Safety, it means that people feel safe to experiment, they feel safe to ask questions, provide some suggestions. Everybody should be welcome in a team, and we don't want the team to be divided into one wise person that knows everything and doesn't need anybody else's input. Vulnerability also means that we assume nobody is perfect because, as someone once said, to err is human. We all make mistakes. Don't pretend this doesn't happen. Let's just embrace it and be done with it. And shared future means that we believe that what we are doing together, we would be doing it also in the future. So building this team, building this culture is not something just for now, for the next few weeks, but it's something that will make it easier for us and for our teammates in the near and in the further future. So these are the tools to build the culture. And then there are some things that can help solve the ego issues themselves. One of them are formal processes. And by formal processes, I don't mean that you need to just document everything that you do. But if you see that there are several different approaches, and these approaches may not be entirely compatible. So, for example, people are using different operating systems on their computers, and they are not taking into account how it may work on another operating system. Then it's best to introduce a formal process that, for example, this software has to be tested in this way, or everybody is running, for example, this distribution or this operating system or whatever. No bureaucracy, just putting down things that we want to have in common. Everybody on the team still has full autonomy over everything else, but we agree that to make ourselves more comfortable, we want to put our egos aside and just do as the others are doing. Another cultural tool for egoless programming is code reviews. Code reviews are great because there is more than one person at each time looking at the code, and people are getting familiar. This code is less entrenched, and people can exchange ideas about the code. They learn, they share their knowledge, they feel that the code is a part of, it's owned by the team and not just the single person. And another great cultural tool is pair programming, in my opinion, because it also allows quick transfer of knowledge. We have one person who is, for example, proficient in one technology. We have another person that is proficient in another technology but doesn't quite know the technology A as well. When we put them together to work in a pair, they can quickly learn from each other, exchange ideas. That's probably the best, or definitely one of the fastest ways to encourage knowledge sharing. And if we want to implement pair programming, it's also important that the pairs are not always the same, because this way we are creating just smaller silos and not maintaining the free flow of the knowledge that we would like to achieve. So when we have code reviews, formal processes, pair programming, it turns out the code starts to look more or less the same regardless of who actually wrote it. And as we know, when things are named the same, everything is much easier to understand. Is any of you familiar with this one? Just one person. Okay. I have a Python background, so monthly Python puns are my favorite. This is the Bruce's philosopher's sketch. From the right, the guy is named Bruce, another one is Bruce, the sitting one is Bruce, the standing one is Bruce, and the guy in a suit, I'm not sure how is it called, but he's not Bruce. And so it brings some confusion to the people that there might be someone on a team that's named differently. Yeah, it's just easier when everything is the same as it is. Now, there are some software tools for egoless programming, and as I've mentioned, I have a Python background, so these tools are mostly aimed at Python. Some of them are more universal, but either way, you could use them. You could find tools like that for any other technology that you want to use, so it's not that they're irrelevant for your own purposes. So tools that we can use are, for example, linters, code formatters. Linters basically catch different problems before we start running the code. They're also called the static analysis tools. So basically trying to figure out what may go wrong once we start this code. Code formatters make it easy for everyone to use the same formatting to make the code look the same. There are often discussions about how we should proceed with the coding guidelines, how we should write the code. My opinion is that just take a tool that does the work that you want to do, so it's a good code formatter, and just use the default mode that it uses. For me, for example, the yet another Python formatter is a great example for Python because it just uses some predefined set of rules, and we don't have to waste time discussing how should we name things, how should we write things, etc. For Python, there are also some auxiliary tools like pyannotate and mypy. They also help catching bugs, so make them more relevant, more visible. This may not be necessary in other languages, but if you have some other tools, use them to make sure that everyone is running the same set of checks. That was crazy. Thank you very much. I suppose I moved too much. I have to be more stable. Yeah, and to make sure that everybody is running the same tools, the best way to do it is to use some Git hooks. The Git hooks is a way to run a set of steps, predefined steps, before we do some Git action. So if we are, for example, if we want to commit some code, we run git commit, and we can have a pre-commit hook that would run all the other tools, so pylint, yap, etc., 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 before we commit. So we can have the feedback, we can have the quick code review before we even send the code to others for actual human review. This way, we could detach the technical or stylistical part of review that's best done by machines from the architectural review that's best done with people. So people don't have to worry about, oh, you forgot to name this variable, so it's more than three characters in length. People can then focus on the important things, on the things that bring value. If we have some automation like in Git hooks, we may also go a little bit further and produce some build scripts, so the software is built everywhere the same. We can use, for example, makefiles or whatever build system we want to use. And if we have build scripts, we can introduce continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines. I think you now see that it's actually converging towards the DevOps part more and more. Another way to avoid waste by discussing all the time which way we want to go is to use opinionated frameworks. If we have, for example, a framework like Kubernetes, we no longer need to waste time discussing, okay, so how should we approach this? How should we approach this? We get this huge book that says, you shall do this in that way, or else we won't support it. That's great. You don't have to make choice. You are free to just do whatever you want to do, just deliver features to the client. And the last thing I wanted to mention from the tools part of egoless development is behavior-driven development. Why I think it's nice? I think it's nice because behavior-driven development should generate a dialogue between the client, the business, the development, everybody that should in any way be part of the product development. All the interested parties are now starting to talk together, trying to figure out what's the desired behavior of the product we are building here. Okay, I wanted to share some tales of horror from my own experience, but I see that the time is running out, so if anyone's interested, you can just catch me later and I'll probably share some. The conclusion is that using the tools, both the cultural tools and the software tools, can help us write better code and reduce waste. And that's important because this way we can work less and play more. I understand that for many people, writing code, caring for the infrastructure, doing operation stuff is also a lot of fun. We love our work and we love to do it, so the fun part is really important. But let's not forget that beside work, there's also other fun activities. So we can just play ball, spend time with our children, watch some movies. If we reduce waste, we can focus on that part. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Piotr. Brilliant.
Thanks.
Does anyone have any questions for Piotr? We have a few minutes. Otherwise, just raise your hands if you want to have some questions for Piotr. They're welcome. Any question? I cannot see well from here. Otherwise, we want to share a couple of horror stories because I was really looking forward for that. You've got a few minutes for that. How are you feeling?
Nah, I don't think it's that important. It was just, something that if we had really too much time, I think that we can just stop at that point.
Okay. So we have a few minutes to say thank you very much to Piotr.
Thank you.
We don't have Maria, but we have Piotr. So
oh, yeah. That's amazing. Thanks.
A Toblerone for Piotr. Thank you very much.
Thank you.